So, do you wonder how things are going with your child being included in the general education classes? And maybe you're only getting things like smiley face stickers or a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and it really isn't telling you very much. Today, we're going to explore the topic of school communication. I'm going to be sharing a couple tools with you, and I would love for you to share in the comments what tools, what methods that you use for communicating with your teacher. So if you're new to our show, I'm Charmaine Tanner. I'm a parent and an advocate, and I help parents get the inclusive education that their child deserves without feeling alone and that overwhelmed feeling, right? And I do this with my free weekly Facebook Live trainings and also working with families one-on-one. So I am thrilled that you are here, and we are going to dive in. But first, if you can share in the comments, what kinds of information do you want to receive from the people who work with your child? Because that's really the number one thing that we need to be doing is, I often hear from parents, it's like what I get from the school isn't really helpful. So then the next thing is, well, what information do you want to receive? Different parents want different kinds of information, right? For some parents, it's really important to know how much, liquid their child drank during the day. For some parents, it's important for them to know how they participated in the reading group and how that went in the classroom. So if you can let us know in the comments, what is the information that you're looking for your child? And then maybe we can explore some ideas for you. And also, I wanted to show you, if you get my weekly advocacy tips, then you will receive tomorrow morning in our weekly email a guide that talks about homeschool communication. If you don't get my weekly email, go to this link, iep.today/weekly ad tips, and you will get that tomorrow morning in your email box. So how are we? Say hi, let us know where you're watching from, so I also welcome you. Now, we are going to look at, like I said, a couple tools that I've used with parents, and oops, I need to hide that. And I was going to share with you this wonderful little French restaurant that served the best breakfast. And years ago, when I was still advocating in Colorado, there was a mom I was working with, and we would meet on a regular basis for breakfast and strategize what she wanted to get from the school as far as information. So what she told me that she was looking for is, what are some ways that we can embed his IEP goals throughout the day so the school actually understands that the IEP goals can really be worked on throughout the year. So this was our goal. How we're going to see her son's IEP goals, how they could be worked on during general ed classes, and also other naturally occurring times during the school day. And so what we first looked at is something that you may have seen before. It's called an Iep Goals Matrix. And this was actually a tool that was really popular a few years ago, and I haven't seen as many people using it since. So let's look at this. So this was a way, and this was an example that I was showing the mother I was working with. This was not for her son, But what you do is you list your child's IEP goals down here on the left side. So some of these are saying initiate conversation with peers, decode multisyllabic words, solve two-digit multiplication, ask for a break. So on the left side, you write down your child's goals. And then at the top, you write down, and this was for an elementary student, the typical sequence, the typical schedule in the general ed class. So they have arrival, then they go into reading, they have recess, math, writing, lunch, another recess, specials, and dismissals. And then what we're going to look at is how can we see which goals can be worked on throughout the day. So initiating conversations with peers, well, I mean, that can happen, right, throughout the whole day. So we put an X in all of those columns because throughout the day, your child can be working on that. It doesn't have to come from being pulled out with a speech therapist. Now, look at the reading goal. Where can we work on that? Well, for sure during reading group time in the general ed room. Also probably in math, especially if they're reading word problems, things like that. They're going to be decoding words. And then also during writing time. And then let's look at the next goal, which is a math goal. And for that, you know, we really see probably only math time as a period during the day that your child would be working on that multiplication task. And then as far as the last goal for your child to ask for a break, again, depending on your child, I mean, this might be across the day. There might be certain times that, you know, you've noticed that your child is needing a break either before or after a new subject. So this IEP goal matrix, it helps you, like I said, look at your child's goals, and it helps the staff to see, yes, your child can be learning general ed curriculum in the general ed class while also working on their IEP goals. So this is a basic matrix that can be really helpful for conversations with the staff that work with your child at school. So let me know in the comments, have you ever used a goal matrix like this? Let me know. So Liz is here. Hey, Liz. And Marie is here. So Liz was saying what she wants to know from her, the staff that works with her son or child is, who does he speak with? Independence is he getting? What exactly is he reading? What exactly is he doing in math? And what methods are they using to help him write independently? So those are great things, right? Because it's kind of like the nuts and bolts of like, tell me really what's happening. And so this is a good list. And then Liz, what you can do is take this and have a conversation with the staff and say, how can we develop, how can we tweak a tool maybe that already exists, or how can we develop something that would give me this kind of information? And we'll be talking in a little bit about some other specific examples that you might want to read. And Lisa says, breakfast advocacy sounds great. I know it is. Get team communications added to the IEP minutes. Yeah, Anne Marie. And that's something that I know Julie Costin talked about a few years ago when she was on my show that I thought was such a good idea. And Julie was talking about was to look at all the service minutes that are devoted to working with your child directly, and then look on the IEP, are there service minutes for indirect services? So that's like planning with, you know, this between the special ed and the general ed teacher. Is there time built in for that? Is there time built in for the teacher and the parent to have time to talk, right? And so sometimes it's like, how can we squeeze any more minutes out of the day? So what you can look at is, can we take some of those direct service hours and minutes and move some of them to indirect service so there can be planning, collaboration, consultation time? Because that is like so critical, right? In order for kids to really be successful at school. So one of the that I'll give you is to look at those service minutes and see how we can use those in a different way to make a bigger impact on your child at school. Also, let me know, do you have that written in your child's IEP? Are there some direct planning consultation times? Because that, that is something that you really want to make sure. So Liz also says, how are they helping them access the general ed curriculum? My child is included in junior high, is mostly included in junior high. Yeah, and those are the things. And as we go through and talk some more, you want to try and find something that's going to be easy for the teacher to record and doesn't take a whole lot of time, but it's also got to give you the information. So sometimes it's check boxes, sometimes it's, short answers. Like today in reading, we read, and then they just fill in the name of the story. Or depending on your child, maybe your child starts answering some of those questions that you want to have the information for. So it doesn't always have to be the teacher or the para. Your child, depending on their skills, they can also help tell you what happened during the school day, but do it in, have the teachers help them in a structured format. So that's another idea that you can look at too. And Anne Marie says, I want to know what she does during recess, center times, who interacts with her. What did she do that shows she is learning? What did she do during therapy, related arts, transition? So yeah, and that's what teachers need to hear from families is, this is the information that's going to really help me. And so that's, super important. I'm going to go back to the example of the parent that I was working with. And we first looked at, like, would something like the Iep Goals Matrix help us? Yeah, it helps, but it doesn't, for this mom, it didn't really have all the information that she wanted, because in this situation, the mom said, I want to know how many times he's being prompted to do things. And is it just a verbal prompt? Are they physically having to help him? And she also was really concerned about, are they really using the accommodations? So because that was the information that this mom was asking, the mother and I worked on a new tool. And so we've been talking about these action steps. Make sure you identify the information that you want from the school and either revise an existing tool or invent a new one, right? So thanks for putting in the comments what kinds of information you want to receive. So here's that IEP Goals and Accommodations matrix. And let me bring it up. That would help. That we developed. And I know the font is really small, like this is as big as I could get it. So I tried to block it out so it might be a little bit easier to read. But in the email, if you're on my weekly emails, you'll get tomorrow a copy of this and some other tools. So if you don't get my emails, go here and sign up. But what we did here is we wanted to list the IEP goals, but we also wanted to list, was he doing it independently? Did he need a physical prompt, or did he need a verbal prompt? And then these were the goals that he had in his IEP. And I'll read these out loud because it's like tiny, tiny font. I apologize. I don't know how to make it bigger on PowerPoint. Pay with money and debit card. Listen to reading, answer 5 comprehension questions, use the calendar and figure out how many days away a certain event was, independent toileting, computer word processing, audio cues, voice output, word prediction for emails, lists, and notes, and assist with transfers from wheelchair. So this was a high school student. These were his IEP goals. So like the other matrix, the other thing that you do is list the order of classes here at the top. So he had US history, math, English, choir, lunch, and biology. And then what we did is we looked at that first goal. Let me find my cursor. And the goal that we looked at was pay with money and debit card. And during the school day, the time that he worked on that goal was when he was going to the cafeteria. And on this specific day, when they filled it out, he needed a verbal prompt. So V is for verbal prompt, and the key is up here. So then the next goal was for him to listen to a reading and answer 5 comprehension questions. Well, he can do that in US history, he can do that in English class, and he can also do that in biology class. And the day that they recorded this data, during history class, he was able to listen to the reading, answer the comprehension questions independently. In English, he needed a verbal prompt, and in biology class, he needed a verbal prompt. So, and then I'll kind of quickly go through these other ones using the calendar to tell how many days we're away from a certain event. He liked doing that at lunchtime. He would use his cell phone and check out and see like when the next basketball game was, or a variety of things. So during lunchtime was actually the time that worked for him to work on those kind of like technology skills, right? And then let's see, beep. Independent toileting, he had a couple breaks and he needed partial a physical assist for that. And then using his computer, the word processing program, again, you go across and see where he did it, but not just where he did it, but what was the level of prompting that he needed, because that was something that was real important to this mom. And then transfers with the wheelchair, he pretty much always needs a physical assist with that. So this information at the top, this helped the mother know how much prompting is going on and what kind of prompting is happening. But she also wanted to know about accommodations, and are they really using his accommodations? So we listed the important accommodations here, and we also had a code. They would check it. If they used the accommodation, they would write a 0 if they didn't use it. So wait time for responses, modified curriculum, auditory instructions and directions, reader as needed, reduce visual clutter, glasses as desired, and a specific one for him was to position the materials to the left of his midline, about 12 to 18 inches away. So those were the specific accommodations for this high school student. And the mother was saying, how can we tell if they're really using them? So what we did is, again, we would just go through for US history class. Yep, he used it. He used it. Wait time was also used during math, English, choir, didn't have to use the wait time and lunch, motivated there, right? And in biology. So anyway, we go through the rest of these and we see which accommodations were used in which classrooms. Now, again, this was something that was specifically designed for an individual student. So it's like, well, great, Charmaine, but that really doesn't help me. What I'm hoping to do is just generate some ideas for you about some possibilities. There are some things that you can have marked and checked, and that will be helpful. There's other things that you're going to need more information about. So break down the information that you're needing and then talk with the staff and say, what are some ways that we could either tweak another tool or invent our own? So we're sharing that information back and forth. And let's see. Hey, Christy. She says it's so hard to get meaningful information, even with simple fill-in forms. In reading, I read books. In music, we sang songs. At recess, she played with friends. Do not give information for me to talk about her day. I have held back info about the weekend break, forcing them to ask for more details, and then use that conversation to reiterate again why I need details to have meaningful conversations about her day. Yeah, and that's the thing. I think it's probably a combination of reasons, right? People, teachers, paras, staff are really busy. It's hard for them to sit down for very long and be able to capture things. So another thing that we can do because of technology is use our cell phone, right? So let me know how many teachers send you like a photo of a project that your child did, or maybe text you some information. So sometimes teachers are using their cell phone to relay information. And then what makes it nice about that, so Christy, I don't know if they'd be willing to do something like that, like a photo of her, in music class. And then also when she comes home from school, it's not just like, oh, I heard you went to music today. It's showing her the actual picture, like, look, this was in your music class today. And maybe having that photo would help generate conversation. But yeah, it's, and I don't know, maybe it's like how we teach kids sometimes, right? This is an example of communication that's really helpful for me. And saying she played with friends at recess is a non-example. This isn't helpful. And yeah, sometimes it just takes all that modeling. And like I said, if, one of the ways that your daughter could practice her typing skills is to type something for you so you would know what she did, during reading group or something like that. So yeah, as everything we're doing, we're asking people to change their behavior. And we know that takes time, right? It doesn't happen all the time. And also getting pictures and videos of the class can reveal lots of great information. And I know some families will say, well, what about like if there's another student in the video, or, what about the student's privacy? So, I mean, you can check with the teacher. Most schools have kind of a blanket consent that they ask parents to sign at the beginning of the year, giving permission for, photography or video. And so check and see if there are parents that, did not sign that consent, then for sure you don't want those children in the video or in the photo. But yeah, I mean, that, how we talk about how, a picture speaks 1,000 words, and a video is even better, right? So that might be something to do. the thing with that is then you have to have a way to organize and save those text messages, those photos, videos, have a folder where you drop them into, because yeah, that would be a great way to do it. Stacy, hey Stacy. She said, I love this suggestion. I wonder if they could use an AAC device like an iPad to take the pictures and just put in a file. Yeah, I think that would be amazing. And then that also goes into progress monitoring, right? I mean, it's not just homeschool communication, but we're also talking about this is a great way to gather information for progress monitoring. Because the matrices provide some information, and depending on what you want, that might be something that works for you. But it might be like, no, that still doesn't tell me much. And so that's why I love everybody sharing their ideas, because we can gather more information and share more tools that has already been helpful for you. So Abigail says, prior to COVID-19, teachers said they could not send pictures. But since then, each class has a Facebook closed page. Oh, that's neat. They post information of what the whole class did and add pictures and videos. This has been great. I get to see what she's doing in videos and pictures. How cool is that? Yeah, that is so neat. And I, kind of pre-tech for a lot of things. When I was still teaching in the classroom, I had my kids write a weekly newsletter, and they would type it on the Apple IIe computer and draw pictures to go with it, right? Because we didn't have cell phones that took pictures back in those dinosaur days. But yeah, I mean, think of the possibilities that are out there now with technology, and it just comes from your phone. So isn't that so cool? I love it. I love your ideas. Oh, here Christy says, a shared Google folder would work. We have had success using Google Docs in the past. Yeah, and that's a great idea too, because with Google Docs, you can, each make comments back and forth. Because the other thing that we're going to talk about in a couple minutes is the importance of what you share from your home, and if your child slept well and all those good things, and what you share with the school. And I know Christy said you were modeling that for them, but they weren't getting it. And Christy said, I have offered whatever format works for them: electronic, pictures, email, text, paper. It is a challenge. And depending on the staff member, they might have a preference for, I would just much rather at the end of the day send you a quick email. Somebody else is like, no, I would rather just, snap some pictures or videos and send those. So your communication with different staff members more likely is going to have to be tweaked according to, what their preferences are. And you guys have such good suggestions. Anne Marie says, what are your thoughts about sharing information about home life back to the school, sleeping, eating, medication, appointments? Good segue, because let me see if we go back to our slides here. Yeah, so the next step is to also be able to share information that the staff wants to know. And it's not like you need to share personal information that really doesn't pertain to your child being at school, but things like Anne Marie mentioned, did your child sleep well? Is there a change of medication? Is he going to try hot lunch today and you're not sure how that's going to go? So those kinds of tidbits of information can also be helpful. But again, what you want to do is just like you want to identify the information that you want from the school, we need to give the school the opportunity to say, these are the types of things that we would love to know from the family. And then, oops, let me go back here. And then have that time where you can sit down and collaborate with the staff. And again, either use something existing or create something new for that homeschool communication. So what things have you guys shared? And Anne Marie says, great minds. I know, look at all this good stuff we're coming up with, right? That's why it's so nice to have time to come together live so we can talk about these and share these ideas. And Lisa has a good comment. She said, I want to know how much instructional time is being lost by undocumented removals from class. So then probably the first the first hurdle is, how do we get the school to accurately document how much time your child's been removed from class? That would need to kind of go into like what the behavior plan is saying, and what they are collecting as far as data. And then I think what you would need to do is have a conversation, like that's the first part that I think Lisa would need to solve, is how are we collecting information about when the child is removed from the classroom, and ask to see what data they collect, what method they're using. You can also ask for, a daily report on how much, not just how many times your child was removed, but like you said, what's the cost for instructional time? So then for them to also list how long the removal was for. Maybe they're doing an okay job keeping track of how many times he's removed, but maybe they're not keeping track of how long that is for. So for sure, look how things are worded in the IEP, and then it more than likely will need some amending so you can get some of those issues addressed. And Anne Marie says, I use the information to support why peer interaction is helpful for my daughter and identifying areas that she may need additional support. Yeah, and I think that's the thing too, is not only what information you want from the school, but why and how you're going to use it. That it's not just a request to, give teachers some kind of additional work to do, but that it's really helpful. And all of this can be and needs to be written in the IEP, what that's going to look like. So just writing homeschool communication, in the service time or in the, optional statement of service delivery, just writing homeschool communication is not going to do it. You really need to be exact and specific, or it's like up to interpretation for anybody, right? So once you have figured out what information you need, why you need it, so they understand that, make sure that you've got some kind of information in the IEP that talks about that. And then Lisa says, how can progress on the interaction goal be tracked? Yeah, and so, it depends on what are we looking for in the interaction. Are we looking for your child to initiate and say, hi, can I play with you? Or are we looking at your child to respond to a peer? Like if a peer says, hi, how are you? And we want to figure out, does your child respond to that? So just be specific first about what you want to track. And depending on what it is, you can track it by how many times it happens. You can look at certain time periods, like, at lunchtime when it's, less structured. Do you want to see how many conversations, how many times your child is, responding and talking back with his friends? Is it at recess time? And what you can do is have the speech and language therapist do some observations during those more social times, like lunch, recess, maybe even during something like art class. And of course, going into the general ed classroom and seeing and have the speech therapist do some observations. And that would be a way that she or he could progress monitor your child in a variety of settings, not just what they're doing in the speech room. So yeah, but it's really good to think of also in terms of progress monitoring. And so let me show you a couple other things here. And sure. So this was an idea that a parent had talked about. And so this was from Teachers Pay Teachers. I don't know if you've ever been to that website where they have, different worksheets or collections of things that teachers will buy from each other to use. So this is something that I'll put in the newsletter that comes out tomorrow, because I have a handout in there. And again, if you get my weekly emails, you don't have to worry. If you don't get my weekly emails and you want to get more information and ideas on these tools, go to iep.today/weekly ad tips. But what this parent did, so she saw this, and it is so cool, where you can make a template for Post-it notes. And, depending on the size of your Post-it note, you're going to make that size template. But I'll give you the link for the templates. You make a template, you put your Post-it, you take off one Post-it note at a time and put it on the template. You carefully follow the directions of feeding this into your printer. And what this mom did was she wrote down the important accommodations for people to remember when working on paper pencil kinds of tasks. And so what was so cool is she could print a bunch of these off, send them into the school. And what the para would do is she would peel off one of those Post-it notes that had the accommodations, stick it on the paper that the child was working on, and be able to remind herself, oh yeah, I'm supposed to do this or that. And she could check off the ones that she used. So this is, I don't know. I guess because I love Post-it notes. Do you love Post-it notes? I think this is such a cool idea. The original idea that's shown right here is a parent did this for chores. So the kids could have a list of their chores to do. But it also could be a way of tracking and getting information back from the schools. So you might want to try that one. And you probably know that you can go onto Pinterest and you'll find a gazillion homeschool communication tools. What I'll do, or what I started doing, I'm going to add some more to it for the e-guide that comes out tomorrow for homeschool communication, is give you some examples like this in the links, because it can be time consuming to go and figure out which one, is really helpful. So these are a few ideas, and think of all the other ideas that you guys came up with. So thank you so much. Let me know if you have any other questions or comments. I'm hoping all of this is coming through, because I had to use my phone hotspot. Emery says, do most of your IEPs already include time for teacher communication and supplemental aids and supports, like 30 minutes a week? Yeah, and it depends. But like I said, if you want that to happen and you don't have it written in the IEP, if something comes out later. Like I know I was working with this one family, and the teacher was just giving wonderful information every day, and so much good information, and it was wonderful. And there wasn't anything written in the IEP because the teacher just did this. Well, come December, when some things got a little rocky between the family and the school, the teacher stopped writing all those daily, emails with great information. And there was nothing the parent could do to hold them accountable because it wasn't written in the IEP. So even if things are going really well and you've got a great communication tool that you're using with the staff, make sure it's written in the IEP, or you can't really hold that, or you can't actually hold them accountable. Right? Yes, the IEP. Abigail says, I send Sunday night emails. How cool. To all of Lucy's teachers and support people. These updates are how she's feeling, doctor's appointments, what she's been doing school-wise at home, what she's doing on the weekend with a picture, etc., hearing aid issues, glasses, etc. Yeah, so all of those little details can be really helpful for staff, and I'm sure that they really appreciate that. Again, you want to look at what you're comfortable sharing, and it sounds like all the things that you're putting in that Sunday night email, Abigail, are perfect to share with staff. I'm sure they would love getting things like that. And Liz says, I write in the communication notebook about what I want the staff to know. However, I don't think the general ed teachers, 2 of them, read it. And I think only one aide reads it. He has 2. How can I ask the general ed teachers to sometimes write in the communication notebook? I think the entire school thinks my kid just belongs to the aide, which of course is another discussion. Sometimes there is important information that they all need to know. Yeah, so that's the thing, right? I mean, that communication notebook can be a really easy way for information to go back and forth. I know sometimes, parents will kind of, put in all caps or highlighted attention, all staff, and then have the staff initial the communication notebook when they've read it. And that can be something that the special ed teacher sets up. I think the other thing, Liz, is to have a conversation with the general ed teachers and say, I know you guys are so busy, and I just want to make sure that you know that I really value your input as the classroom teacher. So, and show them the notebook, because sometimes teachers don't even know you have this notebook that goes back and forth, right? It's only like the teacher, the special ed teacher or the para that knows about the notebook. So 1, make sure they know that that's a tool that they can use. And 2, again, tell them how much you value their input, because so many times general ed teachers, I think, feel like it's not their place to say something to a family with a child on the IEP, that's what the special ed teacher does. So it might be a great conversation to have with the special ed teacher, with the general ed teacher together, and also consider asking the principal, because it's like, is there this unwritten rule in the school culture that only special ed teachers communicate with parents? So that might be something that you look at too, like, why is that such a practice in the school? But yeah, that's a great point to bring up, Liz. And Anne-Marie said, if it's important, I would include it in an email versus a regular evening recap. Yeah, so you just got to kind of use your judgment there, right? Liz says the general ed teacher might not even know, even though they were part of the meeting where we discussed it. They have a lot on their plate. Yeah, and I mean, that's where those gentle, friendly reminders come in play, because if you think about IEP meetings, how much do we as parents remember when we walk away? And I'm sure that's true for general ed teachers too. Sometimes general ed teachers will get a one-page summary of the IEP, but what I've seen with those is a lot of times it's just like accommodations. The teacher really doesn't know, like, what are some of the goals that this student is working on. And so that's why that general ed goal matrix, let me see if I can pull it back up here. That can be something that can be really helpful. I don't know. I'm not finding it. Where did it go? Here we go. So, oops, it's not sharing. But, you know, for teachers to see, like, yes, this child has some IEP goals, but guess what? They can be worked on in the general ed classroom. So that might be something that you want to use, is that first matrix that we shared. And I want to make sure I'm not missing anybody else's. Yeah, and so Liz was saying this is information she wants. Who does he speak with? How much independence is he getting? What exactly is he reading? What exactly, and I think maybe I did this earlier, doing in math, how they're helping him to write independently. And so, like I said with, I think Anne-Marie, Liz, this might be something that you model for them. Like, you give an example of, you know, some information that would be helpful. So like if you look at, I don't know if your child has homework, but one of the things that you can do if you're helping children with homework, like reading, you know, if they have to read 20 minutes a day or whatever, is you can write something back to the teacher and say, you know, I notice that he was using his finger to keep tracking. Is that okay for him to do? Should I not have him do that? And you can say, I also noticed that he really doesn't, you know, change his inflection when he reads a question than he reads a sentence. I mean, whatever, right? The point is, if you notice things when your child is doing homework, model for the teachers, and you send a note back to them saying, this is what I noticed. This kind of information is what would really help me. If you can also share this after each math class or reading or whatever. So that would be another way that you could do it, is you model that from watching your child do homework. Any other questions? I'll put up the link again if you're not getting my weekly emails, because I have an e-guide that I wrote for today's show. Plus, I'm going to be adding more ideas that we talked about here. And I schedule that tonight, and it arrives in your email box bright and early. So if you want to get that e-guide for homeschool communication, and you're not signed up, go to iep.today/weekly, add tips. Okie dokie. And let me put that down and see if we have any other questions. Abigail says, the week before school starts each year, I have a meeting with all my daughter's support people and teachers, OT, PT, speech, general ed, and special ed. And we go over a one-page about Lucy and her like one-page sheet where it talks about her hearing aids, glasses, short version of what supports Lucy needs, and go over the IEP. It's been helpful. Yeah, I bet. And all of those kinds of about me, you know, information is so helpful. And, you know, I think sometimes we can also send that every once in a while throughout the school year, because teachers can read that at the beginning of the year, but how much really soaks in, or how much do they remember that as the school year is going on? So maybe just make it a habit each time you get a progress report from school, that would be your time to kind of give a friendly reminder about your daughter. Another idea that a parent I was working with did that was really pretty cool was she went through the IEP and picked out the 10 most important things in the IEP for her son. And she did a top 10 list, kind of like David Letterman. And not only did she put the important comment, but she also then put like what page that was on in the IEP. So if they wanted to read more information. So it made it such a nice resource and really handy for the teachers, because if they needed to know more information, they knew what page to look on in the IEP, and that would give them more information. So that top 10 kind of list can be really helpful too. And that's a way to really highlight some of those most critical parts that you want to make sure the other staff know about your child. So what else? And Liz says, I do that too. Unfortunately, I give out his major food allergies on there and said, do not give any food unless sent from home. Well, guess what? So yeah, they can write stuff, but you can't make them read it. Yes, I know, right? And that's why those ongoing conversations are super important, especially when it comes to medical health needs, right? I mean, your child eating something that he is allergic to is like a pretty important, piece of information that everybody needs to have at their forefront, because that can cause really serious complications. A lot of times in the schools, the school nurse will send out a list again at the beginning of the year, usually with students that are in your class, different kind of health needs that they have. But again, it has to be reinforced, just like our kids, just like ourselves, right? We have to try things more than once. We have to do things more than once to get into that habit. So you might think about times when snacks are coming in, like for birthdays or for sure before any kind of holiday parties, send that reminder, these are my child's food allergies. And I'll be happy to send in some snacks for him that he can have at the party. It's kind of that ongoing role that we have as parents, right? But thank you so much for being here today. You guys had excellent ideas. And sometimes I think it's just nice when we can gather together and just bounce ideas off of each other. And it's like, oh, that made me think of this. Or, oh, we could try it this way. So let me know. Did you come up with at least one new idea today that you might want to try? And be ready to come back here next Thursday at noon Mountain Time, because we will have another live Facebook training. And I welcome you as live viewers and replay viewers. And if you think of something later and it's like, shoot, I forgot to ask Charmaine this, come back to this post, put your comments or questions in if you have any links to share, and we'll keep this conversation going, right? So I am Charmaine Tanner. I am thrilled that I can help in any way so parents can feel more empowered and be more effective advocates for their own children. So until next Thursday, take care, and I shall see you then.